Hello and welcome to episode 105 of Toward a Better Life.
Gone, you wore the crown. Now we carry you home. Furrows ploughed in the waiting land, to the ground from my hand this day. Your seeds are sown, and the sun brings the song of your rebirth. Born of fire and water, air and earth, I will care for you through sun, rain and storm. And on the solstice day I will run with a wolf in the corn. Waxing hear the turning wheel, green man of the fields of corn. You stand so high under the summer sun. The wind blows and the wolves begin to run, and so do I. And the sun brings the song of your rebirth. Born of fire and water, air and earth, I will care for you through sun, rain and storm. And on the solstice day I will run with a wolf in the corn. One more sheaf and the harvest home. Wolves fled, you stand alone. Now I cut you down. Ribbons red and a whispered prayer braided through your golden hair once more. You wear the crown, and the sun brings the song of your rebirth. Born of fire and water, air and earth, I will care for you through sun, rain and storm. And on the solstice day I will run with the wolf in the corn. Up, lay you down. Winter's gone, you wore the crown, and now we carry you home.
This is Kevin Pennell, and that was Dave the Bard with Wolf in the Corn from his album Raise the Flag of Green. And you can find that and other wonder-filled works from Dave on his website, paganmusic.co.uk. There's going to be a link in the show notes for that too. Toward a Better Life podcast features like-minded people sharing their stories, ideas, and activities on what we can do together to generate a better life individually and collectively. You can share your prose, your music, your poetry, or storytelling on the show. Just send them to me, Kevin, at towardabetterlife.com. If it's an audio file, just send it to me as an MP3. Please subscribe to the show if you haven't done so already through your favorite podcast platform, be it Apple, Spotify, Amazon, you name it. And keep following for magical insights into earth-based spirituality, self-development, and self-care for that matter. Also, remember to support the show by leaving your review on Apple Podcasts. In this episode, I'm happy and honored to welcome Tahverlee Anglen, author, High Priestess, and Temple Keeper of Moon Temple Mystery School. She's the heart and High Priestess of the Moon Temple Mystery School, guiding seekers through the mystical landscapes of self-discovery, witchcraft, empowerment, and spiritual awakening. Rooted in ancient wisdom and aligned to the wild, she bridges the mundane and the magical, and empowering others to embrace their full power and sovereignty. In this interview, we're talking about our sacred connection to the natural world. Later on in the show, we're going to hear another selection, this time from Spiral Dance. Be sure to stay tuned for that as well. Now, on to the episode and our chat with Tahverlee. Good morning, Tahverlee. And I guess I can call you neighbor because you're only about 6 or 8 hours from me. We're on the coast of North Carolina.
Isn't that great? Yes, good morning.
So, everybody, we're going to have a wonderful time today. We're going to be talking a little bit about what I like to refer to as earth-based spirituality. And Tahverlee has a really good background in that. And Tahverlee, why don't we just kind of start off and let everybody know a little bit about yourself. And by the way, everyone, she has a really good podcast, and there's your cue.
No, thank you very much. Yes. I like to say that most importantly, when I introduce myself, I'm a student of life because I'm continually learning and up-leveling and growing. But I am also a practicing witch, a high priestess. I am the founder of the Moon Temple Mystery School. I host a podcast, a YouTube channel, and am the author of a book called Sacred Magic. And I feel like, to me, the most important thing when it comes to introducing ourselves, because as you know, I've hosted a lot of podcasts and done a lot of interviews, the most interesting things that people tell us about themselves are like, what are they passionate about? So for me, to know me is to know that I'm passionate about helping people really awake and unlock their own inner power. And a lot of people are so uncomfortable with the word power itself because power might equal control or manipulation, but really inner power is our ability to choose, right? Our ability to adjust our energy, our ability to create our life on our terms. And I'm really passionate about helping people do that.
It's funny you mentioned that. And we talk about synchronicity even before we got on here about how things work out. Well, I've recently started looking at some at Ogham, and I look at it, and some pronounce it as Ogham, but at any rate, it's the language of Druidry, and it's really cool because I'm looking at it this morning, and guess what tree I'm talking about? I looked and talked about ash. Of course, what does ash talk about? It talks about that inner strength and the strength to stand your ground and strength to stand with what you believe. And like you said, Tahverlee is just like you said, that it's not a question of, oh, I'm going to have control. No, it has nothing to do with that. It even goes into, you want to use the nice little colloquial term among some folks, and that is I'm setting boundaries, you know? And what I do is just maintaining that power within myself.
Yeah, maintaining kind of, and I love that you brought up a tree reference because a lot of what I do is revolves around moving and operating like a tree, being like a tree, strengthening your roots,
Hmm.
giving your roots time to rest, knowing that on the spiritual path, the deeper your roots grow, the
Hmm.
higher your branches can soar. And trees have time to be quiet, to lose their leaves, to regrow. And when you see yourself as a tree, you see yourself as a rooted individual. And where we go from there is that we get to choose to see
Hmm.
ourselves like a tree. So it's, I mean, the power of choice. And we may not be in control of everything around us, but we always have a choice on how we control ourselves. And that to me, that's a lifetime of work to learn that.
It is. And then you look at the I'm going to say the emotions of trees, and it's interesting the studies that have been done through the most recent years. And it's funny, it's always been there, but we feel like, oh, look what we've done. No, it's always been there. You just never paid attention to it. But that's how we talk about like you said about the root system and how the root systems they communicate with each other. The trees communicate with each other. They will help a tree that's ill. They will help a tree grow and they will help support each other. I saw that not too long ago when, of course, when the hurricane came through and I'm looking
Mm.
outside and we did lose thousands of trees in Western North Carolina. But on the microcosm stage, I watched a couple of red oaks, and red oaks are notorious for not being that solid as a white oak. But nonetheless, I watched them support each other outside my window. And I'm talking about like maybe 30, 40 feet away. And these are like 50, 60-foot trees. And I watch them bend and sway and bend. But just a little bit over from them is an area that wasn't quite as protected. And guess what? One of the trees came down. So they'll
Mm.
support each other. I mean, there's so much that we can get from trees.
I mean, we're so connected to nature. To me, once you feel the connection to all living things in nature, especially trees, you realize that it can be a two-way communication,
Hmm.
right? Like, I love to go sit with trees. One of my 2024 intentions was to sit for one full month with a different tree on my property,
Mm.
to give love to that tree, to give gratitude, to just sit with it, to hear the wisdom of the tree, to, add some extra fertilizer, to give it my breath, to give it my voice. And what happened is I started to feel this sort of like protective loop around my property
Mm.
because I sunk deeper into the connection of trees. And I found this so interesting because I did it for the whole, year of 2024. And then as soon as I was wrapping that up, I saw this interesting study that I would love to share with you if
Hmm.
you're interested.
Please.
This
Oh, yeah.
amazing study that was actually about house plants. I have a lot of indoor plants, and I teach a lot about using indoor plants for people that don't have property or space to, work with outdoor nature in a private way to use indoor plants. And I saw this study, and you know that they can hook machines up to plants
Oh,
now
yeah.
and hit play and it'll play music, right? You can hear the vibration, they can turn the vibration into sound. Well, this study was talking about how indoor plants themselves know who takes care of them. The plants know. And the study was they started to, look at, the vibration of a plant when their owner was around, and then they would send the owner away for several hours, and the plant's vibration would get low, like sad, low. They would almost stop playing their frequency. And then they can measure the distance in how far away their caretaker, their owner was when the plant's vibration would change. It's like 400 feet away
Huh.
is the human that takes care of themselves, those plants. 400 feet away, those plants start to sing again. And their frequency gets higher and higher and higher. And when the human that takes care of them comes into the space, they sing at their normal vibration. And
Hmm.
that just like to me, we know this to be true, but to read it studied in that way and knowing that I had just done this whole year of sitting with these different trees, I'm like, I just created a different type of sacred relationship with the trees just by sitting with them, just by giving them my attention and my voice and my time for a month at a time. I'm like, oh, that was awesome.
I remember, before I ever got a Reiki attunement, for an example, and of course, Reiki talks about, tapping into the universal energy and that sort of thing. And I'm not discounting any of that by what I'm about to say. But before Reiki, I used to go and connect with a tree, either before or after I did some work with someone who needed energy work. And I discovered this. I had not taken any official classes about this stuff. It just came and I
Mm,
just honored it. Where I would say, for an example, I would do some work with someone, and when I'm doing that from an empathic viewpoint, I'm giving this energy to help move whatever it is that needs to be moved in and around that person to help them become more whole. And when I get done, Kevin is wiped out. And Kevin's
mm,
first response is take my shoes and socks off, go out, walk in the woods, and go to start talking or sensing the trees around me. And I feel a particular tree calling to me. And I will go to that tree and I will talk to that tree and I'll say, is it okay for me to connect with you? And I go out over and connect with you. And all of a sudden, of course, the energy comes back and it rejuvenates me. And in doing that, I go through the other process of saying, well, I need to leave something behind. And usually you might be able to tell, Tahverlee, that I did it a lot because I don't have much left up here in the top as far as hair is concerned. But I would give a piece of hair to
yeah.
them. And, so it's that offering back and a thanksgiving. And it's not a worship thing. It's just like if you do something for me, Tahverlee, we have this thing called money, or we might do an act, or we might do something else as an exchange. It's an exchange of energy that I give to that tree for giving to me. And it just comes natural if we just open ourselves up to it. There, I'll get off my horse now, but
Yeah, no,
I get
I
it.
agree. I feel like one of the most underrated offerings to trees is our DNA. And
Hmm.
a lot of people get uncomfortable because there's a multitude of ways to give DNA, right? You can give hair, you can give saliva, there's other ways, but you know, nice, healthy DNA and like to a tree is an energy exchange. It's really fascinating because I also think trees take hits for us energetically. Where
Hmm.
like you're talking about getting an increase in energy from an exchange with a tree, but I also think the trees can transmute what we can't carry or move quickly. And
Right.
I'm curious, Kevin, what do you think the percentage of the population is that is alive on the planet right now that doesn't know how
Mm.
powerful it is to take your shoes off and go put your feet in the grass and sit with a tree?
It's It's probably scary. If you know
Yeah.
the figure, I'd be really interested. We'd be really interested to hear it, but I'm going to say certainly less than half the population.
Hmm. Yeah, I sit in a group of indigenous leaders and spiritual leaders across the world. It's called the Wisdom Keepers Council, and we do often talk about in our own individual practices and fields what we think the percentage is of just even say awakened humans to know that there's more to life than the daily grind. And I think it's changing. I do think that
Oh yeah.
we can feel it on the planet when we say, the collective consciousness is rising.
Hmm.
Basically, in more simple terms, what most people are saying is more humans are waking up and tapping
Hmm.
into like their own energy, just even at the basic level, or even starting to feel and experience energy as their body is as the antenna to experience energy. I mean, just that itself is a starting place. That starts to raise the collective consciousness. So it is changing, but I mean, I don't want to give a percentage because we all make guesses, but it's
Sure.
definitely from anyone I've talked to, probably less than 20%,
I believe it.
which is why you and I do what we do.
Yeah.
This is why this is important work.
Yeah. And the listeners have heard me say recently a couple of times, if not through here, I've mentioned it to other people when I talk about what we do. That is that one of the downloads that's still very popular is one of the ones that was done within the first year, and it was titled Forest Bathing. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had all kinds of downloads, and I'm finding a lot of people are very, very interested in trying to connect with the natural world. I mean, that's one of the things that makes me a druid is that we look at the natural world around us and we honor the natural world around us. And some would say, well, that's you're being polytheistic. I said, no, I'm not really. I'm being animistic maybe, but not polytheistic because I don't necessarily see them as gods, but what I do see is I see them as brothers and sisters and I see them as part of a family. I see myself as connected with them and I honor them. I honor their space just like I would honor your space with where you are, Tahverlee. If I came into your home, I would honor that space. Well, I'm in their home where we built our home. So I should honor their space, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting when you say that, and I think about it from the perspective of, I've worked with thousands and thousands of students, and some of the resistance people have to this idea, because I do think that when people start to feel the connection to nature, they want to honor it, but then they see parts of their life where that's in juxtaposition to that.
Mm.
Meaning, where are they not allowing things to be natural? Where are they using chemicals to get rid of weeds? Where are they not? Because if their life is built around doing activities and practices that isn't honoring that, which is, as a society, what we're fed to do, the idea
Hmm.
of what looks like a perfect lawn and a nice yard isn't necessarily how to connect to it. So when people start connecting to nature and they feel that, they get kind of stranded between the two worlds of, I know this is true, I desire this connection, I know it matters, but I still don't like to have, dandelions filling my grass. So what do I do? And I feel like this is where really important shows like Forest Bathing that you did, and congratulations that you still have, downloads from that episode. That's important work because it gives little bits of ways for people to start embracing it in their life. And I do a lot of that in my book. I try to create simple ways and rituals where you can start to make little shifts and changes, because we're never going to get it all right, at the snap of a finger. We're going to, start bringing in little bits of processes and rituals and new ways of thinking and try things out. And it is a process to balance, your connection and devotion to nature and how we take it for granted. There's a lot of people get stranded in between that. And I know as a, you as a druid, that, I mean, it's an embodied value that you have. And as a witch, for me, it is also an embodied value, although it's not for all witches. I definitely can't speak for all witches, but it is a value that I find is a really good starting place, because everyone has access to nature. Even if you live in an apartment, even if you live in a city, there's always a way to go and find access to nature. And you don't have to buy a big ritual kit. You don't have to, you don't have to go and buy anything to start to feel that connection. And I have an interesting story I would love to share with you,
Mm.
at a time when the first time that I experienced the code, the geometry that sits on the plane of this planet, which is all connected through nature. And it happened during a plant medicine ceremony. And I haven't done a lot of plant medicine ceremony. I don't work with a lot of outside sources other than regular plants. I don't work with any psychedelics on a regular basis, but
Hmm.
occasionally I'll participate in a ceremony with it. And this one time, I'm in the middle of this forest in Boulder, Colorado, and we're doing this, this particular ceremony. And there was someone in the group that was moving dark energy out of them at the time. So it required us all to, especially those of us that are, shamans and oracles, to go in a little deeper to help her move that energy. So we were consuming more than what, this was supposed to be a love ceremony. So we were consuming a little more than what we would have normally consumed. And in one of those moments, like halfway through this whole ceremony, I sat up because I was otherwise lying. I sat up and I looked around me at the forest, and there was a river and there was plants and there were trees, and I could see the mountains off in the distance. And when I sat up, I saw the crystalline grid. Like I saw it with my human eyes. And what it looked like was almost as if you were to picture, if you were to look at a snowflake, right, that falls from the sky, and you were to freeze frame it and then look at it under a microscope and then turn it sideways. That's what it looked
Mm.
like. And what was vibrating the grid itself was the plants and the trees. Like we were a part of it. It's like a web, as we were kind of talking about earlier. It But it wasn't a web of mismatched ways of creation. It was perfect geometry, and it was lit up and created by nature. And I sat there for a few moments looking around like, wow, I am visually seeing the crystalline grid and how I can tap into it. Now, fast forward, years later in my practice and in my teachings, I can go into the space to access that crystalline grid now.
Hmm.
Like it's a way that I can create connection. So when I said I sat with trees, I was sitting within the field or the space within the crystalline grid that I can see that exists, and I can move myself into that plane closer to trees. But I thought you might find it interesting that that's how I experienced it in that particular journey.
And my brain, when you were talking about that, my brain went to mycelium
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm,
how that connection is so unique. You know, anybody that wonders about it, it's a part of the body of a fungus that doesn't reproduce and usually consists of growing something else, like growing in something else, like soil, organic matter, tissues, or plant, or whatever. But mycelium, and I thought the web, mycelium, it's that connection,
mm-hmm.
and it's almost like it's coming out to make contact with us. It's and it's not like you said, it's not a web, but it is a web. And
It is a
it's
web.
it
Mm-hmm.
and it's like they're reaching out with loving, it's like the little strands, and they're reaching out to touch us if we allow that to happen. And when you were talking earlier about the studies on the plants and how indoor plants can feel the difference of their person that's coming close, or that they're leaving. And it's just fascinating about how we can connect with this. And it goes back to, um, what is it? The Magic of Water by the Japanese fellow. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I
what's his
forget the
name?
name.
I always do this on shows.
It's not a moto. It's
But
yes. Mm-hmm.
but how they talk about the magic of water, and how you can talk down to water. But you know what I've thought about before? I thought about stories about people talking to their plants and how the plants would flourish when you would play good music for them, or I say good music, but any music for that matter, and how they respond accordingly. And you talk to them nicely and how they respond accordingly. And then they did other studies where you would curse them or talk nasty to them or whatever, and it would actually hurt the plant. And people thought, "Oh, you're just out of your mind." Not really. No, this has been going on forever. So, where do we go with that? How do we take this information? How do we convey this type of, I'll use the word that you started off with, and that is passion. How do we share the passion like this? And how can others, take part in this passion of how to connect with that natural world a little bit more?
I mean, I guess it depends on where you're at now. Like
Yeah.
where are you starting? I mean, if you have a meditation practice, if you already know how to work from altered states and manage your own energy, but the nature piece hasn't been brought in yet,
Hmm.
building in a ritual twice a day of going to sit in nature without any device, without any people, for sure is the easiest way to start. But then there are levels and layers that you can add on to that. And I say that it would depend on where you're starting because for some people that live a very busy, life and caught up in the day to day and don't have rituals and practices, I think actually connecting to yourself first is more important than connecting to nature because to connect to yourself then allows you to expand your field to connect to nature. Um, and then for people that are at advanced states, I always want to bring in the reminder, don't forget there are also land spirits that live in amongst nature that you can, build in connection to spirits that live amongst all this energy in the plants. And for some people, that's like mind melting. They're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, yeah, there's also land spirits, but it depends, right, on what stage you're at. I think the best way is for people to just start to find something, find a meditation, a walking meditation, find a class, read a book, find a way to give you specific instructions and try it.
Yeah. When I was teaching at a school not too far away, we were in the middle of a city, and I was teaching an herbology class. And I said, one thing that I always want to do is we can sit in here and we can be all academic, and I can show you some really cool pictures through the computer up on the screen, and yet we're not really connecting with it. And you
Mm,
could see all their faces, and they're saying, "We're in the middle of a city. What are we going to do?" I said, "You really want to know?" We had this little green patch of grass, and there were a few trees on it, and it was maybe, I don't know, I'm gonna say 50 by 70 out beside this building. And I said, "All right, class, let's go." And I took like 15, 20 people out. And it was like, I don't, it doesn't matter the time of year, but I went out there, and guess what tree is out there? And I already knew it, a hawthorn. And I said,
mm, 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 mm.
And I said, okay, we're going to go out here and I want you to just kind of walk around. And I was moving that direction. But the first thing I'm saying is I'm saying that the grass, I'm using air quotes, if you want to call it that, there's also plantain there. And for anyone that isn't really understanding what plantain, I'm not talking about the banana. I'm talking about a plant. And just look it up because it is a plant and it's very, very beneficial. I can go way off on that one. I'm not going to go there, but I'm going to pointed out to them plantain. I showed them clover, and I showed them a couple of other things. And I said, "Oh, by the way, take a look at that tree over there." And they all looked at it, and I said, "That's a hawthorn tree." And I shared about, the medicine of that tree and some of the spirit of that tree and how important that tree is. And I said, "What I want you all to do," and Tahverlee, I could not have asked for this better. The spirits just put it together for me, and I said, "Oh, this is dynamite. This is great." Because I said, "I want you all to take some nice cleansing breaths." And this is in the middle of a city, everybody. Just one tree, 50 by 70 piece of land, and that's it. Nothing else. And I said, "I want everyone to close their eyes. I want you to take some nice deep cleansing breaths. And I want you to feel the air around you. And then I want you to feel the energy of the grass beneath your feet. Take your shoes and socks off ahead of time." And I had them do that. And I said, "Feel all that energy and then feel the tree." And I'm just going to be quiet now. And I just want you to just kind of be here. So during that time of quietness, which is probably not not more than 2 or 3 minutes, guess what happened? There happens to be a fire department 2 blocks away from this, and they had a full alarm fire go off. Got all these sirens and everything, and all these trucks taking off, and everybody's leaving, all this noise. And I opened my eyes long enough to see, and do you know, Tahverlee, not a single student stopped what they were doing.
They weren't distracted. Mm-mm.
And that's the point. When you really get into that place, distractions won't bother you. They just won't because you're connected. And in that mycelium level, in that web level, we're connected to them. And that's magic when you think about it. And, so when we think about forest bathing, for an example, yeah, it's great to go out in the woods, but you can make a connection pretty much anywhere. Just like you were saying, doesn't matter where you are, you can make that connection.
I think you just answered the question on what people need to do. They need to go to Kevin and they need to go into one of his classes and go find a tree in a patch of grass in the middle of a city. I mean, that's perfect. You in that one example, you have just described how easy it is to get started. And I love it. And I can only imagine, I mean, a hawthorn tree is one of my favorite trees. It has so much wisdom to give humans. It has so much wisdom. And I love that you did that. That's kudos to you. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's also paying attention. It's walking aware in the world that we have because we we have these opportunities around us if we just stop long enough to listen.
Okay,
And
so
what I,
there's maybe there's instruction number two that in order to connect with nature, you have to be able to cut out like other things, right? You have to cut
mm,
out your phone, your music, your busyness, and just sit and be. And honestly, that's really hard for a lot of people. And I know because I teach a lot of people how to do this. And there's a really funny social media post that I did recently. It was actually on TikTok, and it was kind of hard hitting. So I'm going to share it with you, but just know it bites a little bit. And I said that I can already tell how successful you're going to be in 2025 by asking you a couple of questions. And
okay.
the first and here it is. The first question is, show me your calendar.
Okay.
Show me how you've set aside time for your, work that maybe makes money, work that makes you smarter, where you've scheduled time to be alone, where have you scheduled time to pursue goals? Like, show me your calendar. And I know right there, many people don't work from, a calendar anyway. So then question number two is, okay, well, let's go back to your calendar and look at how many, sections, let's say out of the course of a week, because sometimes a day is not possible, but in the course of a week, how many blocks of time have you set aside to be with just yourself? No
Mm,
people, no social media, no work, no outcome, no expectation, nothing to do, but to just be with yourself. And then I went on to the next question is, how many periods of time in your schedule have you set aside to be outside in nature? with no
Mm.
expectation, no outcome, no rituals, no magic, no gardening, just being outside and connecting with nature. And then the next question I asked is back to your schedule again. How many sections out of the course of the year, how many ways have you bookmarked following up on your intentions or, taking stock of something that you want to learn that's, in your list of intentions for 2025? Where are you focusing on learning and how are you measuring your intentions? I don't really use the word goals, but how are you measuring growth? How are you checking in and taking stock of where you're at and where you want to be? And I said it so clearly, and it's really interesting. I don't normally, kind of bite like that because then at the end, of course, I said, if you come to me and ask me how successful do you think, like use your seer vision, use your psychic vision, and tell me what I need to know in 2025. I'm like, just show me your calendar, and I'm going to tell you without even using my seer vision. A lot of people came in and said, "Wow, you're usually a little nicer than that. Usually, give us a little softer." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, let's make it simple. This is simple."
And that's it. You just nailed it. Simple.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be complicated. And when you think of, creating a beginning of a new year, which by the way, really, you and I both know the new year technically happens in the spring when it's the rebirth. We're still in the cold of the winter. And I'll say that I've kind of been bursting a lot of people's, New Year's bubbles from 2024 into 2025 because people are like, "Oh, happy New Year." And I'm like, "Yeah, happy start of the new tax season." Because that's the reason why the calendar was created the way that it was for the government to be able to stop a year to collect taxes and then be able to re-up taxes again. So yes, we're all celebrating the start of a new tax year.
You're just
But
loaded with all kind of positive thoughts.
I know. I mean, I know it bites a little bit. And I say it in humor because I celebrate New Year's just like everybody else. But it is important to have knowledge and look ahead. I mean, having a set period of time to evaluate where you've been and where you're going is great. But yeah, I do think that looking at how much you schedule time to be by yourself as a starting place, or how do you make time in your schedule to be in nature? Because if people really want that and they don't know how to do it, that's where it starts, is where
Mhm.
can you find 10 minutes a day? And then, after a couple of weeks, how can you extend that to an hour a day? Or maybe it's 2 hours a week, like finding time to actually make it happen because it doesn't just happen.
No.
You have to make time.
Yeah. And I make my time, one of my times, not all of them. One of my times, as silly as it may sound, is at some point during the course of the day, I go to my elliptical
Mm,
and I have it set up on my elliptical where I can either set up and read from my Kindle or read from a book. And of the two, I prefer a book that I can touch. But that's my time that I will use meditatively. It sounds weird, but the books that I read at that are books on druidry, are books on the natural world, are books on spirituality, are books on Agam, and go on and on and on. But that's what I do, and I really just get into the rhythm of that. And I'm leading into this because I do that normally. I do that naturally. It's just part of my makeup. Ask me how many times I've actually written that in my calendar.
mm,
Zero.
mm,
And I really appreciate what you just brought in because when we put it in there and we write it down on our calendars, we're making an intention and
mhm,
we're setting a plan in motion. Whether or not we can keep up with it is one thing, but the point is we make that initial intention to do that to improve myself and not in the sense of how much can I make out of this, but no, how much can I build myself? How much more connection can I have? And then maybe later on in the day I can write down in there, okay, I've done that piece. Now later on today I need to, not that I want to maybe, but I need to go out
mm,
and sit in the woods. And it doesn't have to be an
mhm,
hour, 2 hours. It can be 15 minutes. Studies have shown if you do it 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week, your blood pressure will drop, your cholesterol will change, your glycemic index will shift, and your overall spiritual well-being and your mindset will shift because just connecting with the natural world. So
yeah.
there.
And boom, mic drop. Yes. I think that a lot of people that are starting or they get off the wagon of taking care of themselves. I mean, truly, if we want to be better as humans in whatever path, right? Whether it's druidry or witchcraft or walking the spiritual path, whatever it is, if we want to be better as humans, it actually doesn't happen. Like we have
Mm-mm.
to choose for it to happen. It goes back to the part of what we talked about at the beginning. And to me, it's a choice to say that I want to have the freedom to choose to be better. If I
Mm-hmm.
want the freedom to choose to be better, then I have to be realistic about, the 13 hours a day that I'm awake. If 8 of those hours are gone with work and then 3 hours are gone with family, well, how can I make myself better if I don't have capacity to grow?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, capacity to growth is intentional. And I know that you have a habit of doing, like you already have a habit and a ritual of getting on the elliptical. And it's like me, I exercise 6 days a week. I don't miss it. I don't need it in my calendar because I've been doing it for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
I don't sacrifice that. But what I did need is I did need in my calendar for all of 2024 to sit with the new tree. That was part of my intention because it was not a part of my regular routine and habit. And, I run 2 businesses and a podcast and do a lot of one-on-one work. So if I don't put it into my calendar, I'll probably get busy and it'll slip my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the calendar is all the current things you're working on and where you're going, whether you're using a digital calendar. Oh, I love it. Kevin's about to show me his written calendar. And by the way, I love things written by hand. So you're talking my language. I love it. I do a lot of painting and I actually have a whole painting in front of me that you can't see that has intentions in little bubbles around an owl. So I look at it all the time.
Oh.
hmm So that's the reason why I talk about the calendar is because for a lot of people, they fall off the meditation wagon or the nature wagon. And to me, it's great. So put it in your calendar twice a week, lunchtime, mornings, evenings, the 15 minutes, the impacts that you talked about. I mean, let's be real. If you're alive as a human and an adult listening to this, you already know this to be true. Like people know now that being in nature is good for them. It's good for their health. People know that moving their body and exercising and eating as healthy food as you can is all good for your body. Like these are not new concepts. You and I are not talking about something that isn't known. But what seems to be the challenge is, well, how do I build it into my current schedule of obligations, into my busy life, and how do I actually do it? And to me, the formula is, like I said, put it in your calendar and also slowly like make slow changes, like add in a little 10-minute walk instead of 10 minutes of scrolling social media between meetings, or when you have a chance, or if you can have a meeting on the phone, walk and talk. Right. There are so many different ways to build in little pieces because we're not talking about anything that people don't already know. They know. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
alive today, your body, how you eat, how you sleep, how often you're in nature is a big predictor to your long-term health. But then we ask ourselves, well, why do people not do it? And I think that they actually just don't know how to build it into their schedule and
Mm.
prioritize themselves.
So knowing and doing are two different things entirely.
Mm-hmm.
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 And doing turns into, I think, in my definition, the difference between knowing and doing, or is an add-on, is wisdom. It's the application
Mm-hmm.
of the knowledge into your life. It's the moving it into your life with the intention of seeking that change for the better. So, yeah, yeah,
And I kind of think of it like a lot of spell work too. As you know, I'm a practicing witch, so
sure.
I definitely do a lot of different spell work and I teach a lot of spells. And there's a component to that that is very similar to what you were just talking about, and that is doing the spell itself is less important than the work you do before to create an energetic alignment and the work you do after to take the action steps. It's not just the spell. It's not just I'm going to do this big working, right, or do a big ceremony and everything in my life is going to change. It's okay, well, how do I become better by working this spell or this ritual? And then what do I do with that? Like
Mm,
it's the I can know a spell, you can read it, you can do a spell, but the action that comes after is putting it into motion, which is exactly what we're talking about is the
mhm.
wisdom of knowing that just knowing something and doing it are two different things.
Yeah,
You need both.
yeah, you do very much so. And within Druidry, we talk about it's the same thing. It's I look at it as synonymous because you have a spell, and I look at a ritual. And what you do with that ritual is something uh, something phenomenal. And you always have the intention, just like you would in spell work. You have the intention. Intentionality is a key point in pretty much all of this. If I go into the woods, if I go into the natural world, whether it be for 5 minutes, 50 feet, or if it's 2 hours, doesn't matter. If you go in there with the intention of increasing your wellness and increasing your knowledge of the natural world, connecting with the natural world. Side note to me, I find it very interesting that when I had moved down to North Carolina, moved into the area beforehand, I was running a lot. I say running. I would, it was usually anywhere from 3 to 5K, at least 4 to 5 times a week. And because I was in the city, I did have earbuds because I've got honking and everything else going around me, and I cannot get there. And yes, this is me talking. Why didn't I just connect with the natural world around me? I can't answer that right now. I will say this. I was trapped in the web. How about that? And so I had the earbuds in listening to music. I came down here, and not too far from here is the North Carolina Arboretum. And it's like 430 plus acres, over 10 miles of trails. And I would go out there and do my run. And guess what I did, Tahverlee? We're creatures of habit. I went out there in all that beautiful natural world. There's no semi-tractor trailers. There's no honking cars. What do you think I did? I put in earbuds.
Well, listen, I have to
And,
say, right,
and
when it comes to keep going, okay, keep going.
okay, just hold that thought. And I one day I just had that aha moment, and I said, "Wait a minute, I'm out here in the natural world. What do I need music for?" And I took them out, and all I did is I listened to the wind, I listened to the trees, I listened to the leaves, I listened to the birds, I listened to everything around me, and I really enjoyed myself just as much, probably more. So go on from there.
I was just going to say that let's bring some perspective and balance in here. Like running, if you want to be committed to running, you might need some music. Like you might need something to motivate you. I'm not a runner, I'm a weightlifter, and I listen to music when I'm weightlifting because I need to step out of my mind and into my body. And so, you might find when you're running that if your mind is like processing everything, which is great, that can be a great time to process. But sometimes you might just want to step out of your mind and be in the whatever you listen to. Maybe it's AC/DC while you're running. I mean, that's a pretty good connection. So I think that there's space for both. But yes, and if you're in a city, I would rather listen to good music than listen to the sound of traffic while I was
Oh
running.
yeah.
I mean, for sure. I even taught a woman yesterday who doesn't practice as much self-care as she wants to, like getting her nails done or taking care of her, her appearance. She doesn't do these things because she finds it really hard to sit in places where people have mindless chatter.
Uh-huh.
And I said to her, I said, well, what about putting your earbuds in and turning some nature sounds on while you're, doing any of your appointments or even waiting for a doctor's appointment? And she's like, oh, and I'm like, you just tune out the chatter, put your earbuds in. And she just, I mean, her face was just, oh. And so there's space for both. So don't beat yourself up if you're running with music. I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes there's space for AC/DC.
sure, there is. Or Queen, or
It depends. AC/DC is because there was like a combination of AC/DC and Guns N' Roses on my playlist recently.
yeah.
And when I left the gym, right, and rolled down my windows to like drive home, I'm like, oh, wait, what is that music? I need the sound of the ocean. And so I turned it off. But balance, right? We need balance.
So this has been great, but I want us to talk a little bit about your podcast briefly, and then I want to go into your book and some of the work that you do. So let's start with your podcast. I listened to it, and everyone, you really should listen to the podcast. So there's your cue on that one.
Yeah, thank you. You can find it. It's called Moon Temple Mystery School. I do it on YouTube and an audio version, so you can find it in all the places. But I think it would be interesting to tell you, Kevin, how I started my podcast. And it's been a part of my growth journey to where my podcast is at now. And when I first started my podcast, it was entirely from an internal intuitive hit that you need to do a podcast. And this was like 2017, 2018. And to that, like intuitive hit to do that, I'm like, what? I don't know how to podcast. I don't know. Like what? Me? I don't, who wants to hear what I have to say? Like, what are you talking about? And it was this series of me testing and trying and testing and trying. And I'm saying this because I know there's a lot of people out there right now that want to share their voice in some way. It might not be a podcast. It might be just writing a social post or sending a newsletter or, making art. The intuitive hits that are the seeds of a lot of creativity lead to places that you cannot possibly imagine. And that's my show. So you might have noticed now that I haven't been doing a lot of interviews, even though the first few years I interviewed a lot of women that were growing businesses that didn't necessarily have all the tools or the support that they needed. So I brought in experts, and then I moved it into high level and deep spiritual topics. And then since then, I switched it into it being a place where I just shared. And I know that that's because, and you might find this too, Kevin, doing solo shows became something that people started asking me for more of. They would say that, well, you only talked like 2 minutes and the guest talked 30 minutes and the guest was wonderful, but where do we go to hear you? Like your thoughts on that topic? And I'm like, interesting. So I started doing these solo shows and moving around into different recording locations to still have good audio and visual, but to be able to sit near my altar, to show my altar, to talk about topics that are important, relevant, and current, and try to create them in bite-sized pieces. And so thank you for listening. It's a labor of passion. I always have about 50 ideas of things that I want to talk about. And most of those ideas come from either an experience in a class that I've taught or a student that we've, went deep into that area. And I realized that a lot of things that I do naturally in my practice and as a teacher and a leader, I don't always know where to go and talk about those things to give those little tidbits of knowledge. And so I definitely invite people to listen. I think, the shows that came out, let's say in December of 2024, was all in preparing you to do real magic to set yourself up for the turning of the wheel, as I call it, right? Moving
Right.
into a new year. And then in January, there's a lot of discussions around like why are your spiritual gifts turned on or turned off, and how do you turn them on? Because we know that our body is an antenna. We all have access to our senses. And how do you do work, say in nature, as we've been mostly talking about, but there are other ways to prime and adjust the signal in which your body brings information in. And I do talk a lot about elemental magic, like working with the elements. Nature is one element, although all the elements can be found in nature.
Mm-hmm.
But, the earth is one element, and, moving into the element of air and the element of fire and the element of water are really powerful ways to work your own rituals and magic daily, monthly, weekly. So it's almost as if people that go to, look for information, what do I do on this full moon? Like, what does this new moon mean? How do I release on this moon? Or what is a particular tarot or an oracle spread for this particular cycle of my life? Well, my answer is it's always easy to go through the elements and find those solutions. And that's a lot of what I share in my podcast.
Cool. That's wow. Are you done? No. Come on. More.
I know I have. I
Um,
did an interview a few months ago, and it was this man has a very large channel on astrology, and I think there was like 50,000 people listening, and he's like, "Wow, you produce a lot of content in a lot of places." And I said, it's how I channel. That's how I channel. I mean, I don't always remember a lot of what I talk about or what comes out because I just allow myself to now channel and I capture it and then I share it. That's pretty much it. And he's like, oh, that's a lot of what you see is what I channel.
my channel tends to be, and it's come back alive just in the past few months, but that's through writing. And of course, I've got this. And it just kind of let it flow. So the other piece is you've got something that is just come out, and that's your first book of 4, I believe. So tell us a little bit about Sacred Magic. It's
Oh, the
magic
baby.
is magical.
Yeah, the baby has been birthed, right? Sacred Magic. It's book 1, and it's called A Witch's Guide to Earth Wisdom. And it's if the first installment in learning how to connect to the ancient way of working with elemental magic as a way to bring more power, alignment, creative energy into your life to truly be able to live life on your terms. And I've written it in a way that anybody can read it and understand. So you don't have to be a practicing witch. You don't have to be a druid. You don't have to have knowledge to have access to the wisdom. And I know in a lot of the traditions that I've walked, right, I'm initiated High Priestess. I'm initiated as a Celtic priestess. I've received the Eleusinian rites. And yes, I have all these things, after my name, but really, how do people that don't know what any of that even means access the same wisdom? So I wrote this in a way that I wanted to share it. And here's another interesting thing, Kevin, is I also included a lot of stories,
Mm,
real stories of
mm,
myself. So it's part memoir, part manifesto, part ritual, part magic. And I shared a lot of stories of when I didn't always get it right, like the
mm.
challenges in my life, like how did I work with the natural world? How did I go into nature and handle when big traumatic eruptions happen in my life? And I've had some doozies, as we all have. And I share a lot of stories that are supernatural, magical. Like you're gonna think, oh my goodness gracious, how like I can't even picture that happening, like crazy things that I've experienced. And I share, working in the underworld, right? Doing a lot of underworld work as a shadow walker. It's, definitely a word that I use to describe myself as I'm really comfortable in going into dark places with humans because I know that their trauma, their shame, the things that are challenging live inside their bodies, as you know. And as a shadow walker, I help them go into those places and bring light to it, not to remove it, but to bring together all the dark and the light part of our lives. And so I share all these stories in the book. So you're getting a lot about me and my experience, as a human and as a teacher, and then also the teachings that I bring forth in areas like the elemental magic itself and areas like on how the North, what season is the North, right? We know that the
Hmm.
North on an elemental wheel, on the medicine wheel is the winter. And how does it impact our body when we're working with the element of North? How do we work with sacred spaces like our home and the spaces we work and even our vehicles? How do we make them sacred? I talk about, in the North, how does it impact our dreams when you're sitting in this part of the elemental wheel? Of course, I talk about psychic gifts and land spirits, and then I have a whole part that is, rituals and spells to bring into your practice in each of these areas, from the element itself to, at the emotional season that you're in, to sacred spaces and dreaming and psychic gifts. And it's been a labor of love that's been in the works for so many years, and finally it's here.
Cool.
Yeah.
And go
People
ahead.
can go to, by the way, to it's just my first name, tahverlee.com, because I also have an oracle deck that's coming out with my book and a journal. And if you see, Kevin can see around me a lot of the art that I produce. So my oracle deck is actually all of my own art as well as channeled messages. And I'm super excited about that too. And it can all be found at tahverlee.com.
Okay. Tahverlee.com. That's Tahverlee. And everyone, I'll even say it now. I'll say it again toward the end here, but all that information is going to be in the show notes with all the links that you need to connect with Tahverlee and kind of go from there. So, Tahverlee, when you work with people, do you work with them by Zoom only? Do you do it in person? Do you do it in groups? How do you work with people?
Well, I live on a pretty remote island out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So I do occasionally hold retreats. And if people get on my mailing list at moontempleschool.com, I will release when I'm holding retreats in person. I do a lot of work on Zoom for sure. And when I travel, there's a lot of people that are kind of on a list of if you're here, let me know and I'll meet people. And sometimes I travel to meet with individual clients if they want full day immersions. But a lot of my work is in classes in mystery school. So I have a class that's called the High Priest and the High Priestess class, which is an initiate path into, learning how to work with embodied rituals. And this tradition is based a little bit on the Golden Dawn. So they're full body
Hmm.
rituals. And that class has open enrollment. And then I also have a class called Extraordinary, which I work with people twice a month. And it's Extraordinary is the place that people can find me the most often live. They get, to work with me one-on-one and in class. And that's really walking the spiritual path, like using everything that is available to us now in our lives to make change. And then I do, one-on-one work as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what does Tahverlee do to create a better life for herself?
Mm, I learn.
Mm.
I'm still just breathing into that question. There's so many things. What do I do to create a better life for myself? I trust.
Mm.
I allow myself to not always get it right. I embrace life being an endless series of, deaths and rebirths.
Okay.
I'm still going. I paint. I laugh. I love good food. I'm a little bit of a food snob. So a better life for myself is creating and making and consuming and eating really good food that makes my body feel wonderful. I cry a lot. Mm. I create a better life by knowing that I'm choosing to have a better life. I'm choosing to live extraordinary.
Okay. Basically, when we think about it, it's learning to live, not just
Mhm.
exist.
In
Yeah.
all its glory, the good, the bad, the hard, the easy, the joy, the sadness. Because the thing is that we're meant to live it all as humans. That's why we're in a body. It's not meant to be high level expansion all the time or rooted and inward all the time. We're meant to have all the spectrum of experiences. And that to me is living.
And maintaining the balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Any last thoughts that you would want to share with our audience today?
Well, I definitely want to share, Kevin, that you are amazing. You're doing
Oh,
amazing
thank
work.
you.
Your show is touching a lot of people and you're bringing in powerful guests and you're making a difference. So I'm deeply honored to be here. It's such a pleasure to connect with you and to feel you. And I get to see you too while we're talking and it's wonderful. So thank you. I'm deeply grateful.
Thanks an awful lot. That means a lot to me and to the listeners as well. So thank you ever so much. And gosh, I am speechless for a change. There's something completely different. But
Mhm.
thanks ever so much for sharing your thoughts and your insights, Tahverlee. And I hope we can do this again sometime. This was simply grand, and how we can
Wonderful.
create a better life for each other. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tahverlee, for sharing some of the magic surrounding and helping us learn to connect with the natural world. You can connect yourself with Tahverlee and check out her latest book through her website, tahverlee.com. That's TAHVERLEE.com, and also through the website moontempleschool.com. Thanks to those of you who have reached out to me through Toward a Better Life. I really do appreciate it. We look forward to a good time together. I invite anyone listening, if you're seeking insights and advice on how to create a better life for yourself, please do contact me through my website, towardabetterlife.com. You're going to find opportunities to enhance your spiritual journey and a few products along the way to assist you, and including the opportunity to buy my book, Two Feather Spiritual Seed Planter, and also to get some information out there for an upcoming, it's going to be a workshop. It's going to be coming up later in the spring. Is also got some online classes in the brew. So do check it out. Send your inquiries to me, Kevin at towardabetterlife.com, for any details about the stuff I offer or virtual or in-person sessions. To all the listeners, thanks ever so much for listening. I truly do appreciate it. And invite others to listen and subscribe through your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to leave a review for me, too, on Apple Podcast. It helps the podcast more than I can say, and it allows me to reach out to more and more people, which would mean the world to me, and it's what we're here for. If you have any questions or if you'd like to share a story, music, prose, if it's an audio file, to send them to me as an MP3. If you want to be my guest or have any other stuff that you want to ask about, please write to me, Kevin at towardabetterlife.com. That's Kevin, towardabetterlife.com. And wait now, we're going to be closing the show today a little differently with another selection from Spiral Dance, which will help us move through the cold of winter and on toward Imbolc and spring with Spirit of the Green. There's going to be a link in the show note for Spiral Dance, too. Don't forget that. Until next time, enjoy your journey toward a better life. And now, here's Spiral Dance.
winter called. Come greet an early morning with frost upon the land. A halo binds the moon with ice crystals in the air, and skeletons of trees like guardians do stand. The harvest is long over, we've passed through Sound's Gate. The misty woods are sleeping, for breeds we kiss they wait. And the wind it cuts like a knife for the bones of Jack Frost Kings. And the Winter King will soon bow down to the champion of the green. And the Lord of the woodland is waiting in the leaves. Through the forest and the hedgerows, the song of life he weaves. With his feet deep in the soil, he watches over the green wood. He's a messenger from nature, his ancient wise God. Hey, oh, it's the Green Man Jack running through the woods, singing up the summertime. And you know you'll never look back from where the spirit of the green will take you. Hey, oh, it's the Green Man Jack running through the woods, singing up the summertime. And you know you'll never look back from where the spirit of the green will take you. There's poetry in the breezes that tell of things to come, with dancing corn and swaying wheat beneath the summer sun. Lay down among the blossoms sacred to the flower bride, lost in scented fields where meadow sweet runs wild. Lady of the lakes and fields, lady of the wood, I feel your verdant energy rushing through my blood. Your silver skin of bark and moss upon your thighs, with ivy twirls and briar curls, you watch with hidden eyes. And can you tell the green man is waiting in the leaves? Through the forest and the hedgerows, the song of life he weaves. With his feet deep in the soil, he watches over the green wood. He's a messenger from nature, his ancient wise God. Hey, oh, it's the Green Man Jack running through the woods, singing up the summertime. And you know you'll never look back from where the spirit of the green will take you. Hey, oh, it's the Green Man Jack running through the woods, singing up the summertime. And you know you'll never look back from where the spirit of the green will take you. And thorn. The summer king has claimed his bride, and all will be reborn. The spirit of the wildwood calls in the language of the trees. Protect the woodlands of the earth is a forest god's decree. For without the essence of the green, our world could never be. Drawing breath around us from the sun into the leaves, from soil and shoot, stem and root, by leaf and bark and limb, we keep alive the wisdom of the Lord and Lady Green. And the wild man of the woodland is watching from the leaves, through the forest and the hedgerows, the song of life he weaves. With his feet deep in the soil, he watches over the green wood. He's a messenger from nature, this ancient wise God. Hey, oh, it's the Green Man Jack running through the woods, singing up the summertime. And you know you'll never look back from where the spirit of the green will take you. Hey, oh, it's the Green Man Jack running through the woods, singing up the summertime. And you know you'll never look back from where the spirit of the green will take you. Hey, Hey-o, it's the Green Man Jack, running through the woods, singing up the summertime. And you know you'll never look back from where the spirit of the green will take you. Hey-o, it's the Green Man Jack, running through the woods, singing up the summertime. And you know you'll never look back from where the spirit of the green will take you.